Days before the 2010 regional elections, legislation was gazetted that empowered the head of state to directly appoint governors. This move brought to an end the dispensation in terms of which regional first citizens were elected into office from a crop of regional councillors who made it that far through a democratic ballot. Years after the fact, the new dispensation is still criticized in some circles for the threats it poses to both separation of powers as well as the fundamentals relating to decentralization. A very good evening, Land of the Brave, and a particular warm welcome to your weekly dose of the Wheels of Justice with me, Daniel Nadunya. We will return in a jiffy to introduce to you our esteemed panel of legal eagles who will help us make sense of all matters law and regional governance. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching the Wheels of Justice, and joining us for this evening's legal legotla are Mr. Florian Bierkes, Managing Partner at Metcalf Bierkes Legal Practitioners, and Madam Robin Heidenreich, Deputy Chief Legislative Drafting in the Ministry of Justice. Leonard, friends, thank you for making time for the Wheels of Justice.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Daniel, for having us.
I still would like to give you an opportunity to raise any preliminary point that you would like us to deal with before we start.
Yeah,
if any.
No, none at all from my side.
I think from my side, Daniel, it's just that it's not surprising that this concern is raised once again during the election year.
Yes.
Right? My question is just, the people who raise the concern mainly, are they registered to vote and are they going to vote?
Well,
that's just something that's been on my mind actually for the last few months. Yeah.
Yes. Is this a concern that you relate to, Mr. Bierkes? Because if this is quite a concern for you, then we'll pose the question, are you a registered voter and are you indeed going to vote?
Yeah, putting me on the spot here, Daniel. Now, yes, I'm a registered voter, so
yes.
Certainly, Robin, that is, I am a concerned citizen.
Right.
Unfortunately, in this instance, I will not be able to vote for the regional governor of Hartap, but we will get to that.
Why is that the case? Perhaps, I mean, these are preliminary points that we need to really deal with.
It's totally out of our hands as local citizens. That is now left in the hands of the president, who has that function to directly appoint regional governors. And I believe that is the purposes of our discussion tonight.
Yes, indeed. Let's then get the discussion going. Let's have regard to the legislative regime prior to the advent of special advisors and governors appointed. Maybe let's look at what happened in the past and juxtaposed to what's currently a practice. Let's start with you.
Daniel, you always like to start with me.
Yes, please.
Yes, so I'm not going to go way back to the Bantu era. I'm just going to start with the constitutional dispensation. If I'm not mistaken, 1990, it's when the Special Advisors Act came into force and the appointment of regional governors. In the past, what would happen is the constituencies would, in essence, vote for their councillors. And when I say constituencies, I mean the rural towns. Like, for example, in Windhoek, you have urban, and you have rural, and you have west, and you have east. So there is considered constituencies. They would then vote. They would then appoint a councillor for that particular constituency. So now these, let's say, for example, in Khomas, I believe that there are 10 constituencies. So out of these 10 constituencies, there will be 10 councillors. Those councillors will then form the regional council. And from that regional council, they would have appointed a chairperson of the regional council. And that person then had a dual responsibility to also serve as the governor for that particular region. So it wasn't a direct, a direct appointment or election from the members, but at least it went through the process where you first appoint the constituency councillor, and then they would elect amongst themselves.
Yeah. How the governors in that time period were elected is that he or she was appointed from the ranks of councillors that were elected during the elections.
Yes.
And thus, it was an indirect elected individual. However, for them to be in the ranks, to be appointed in the first place as governor, they had to have been elected by the citizenry of the constituency.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just in a conversation with one of my colleagues, and he actually told me that, in fact, what happened is that immediately after independence, they were called commissioners and not governors.
Yeah.
And being commissioners, it's basically where they were appointed. They were basically appointed. By
the executive.
By the executive back then. But then it so happened that the system was changed because it was felt that it was undemocratic.
Yes.
And therefore, the issue of being elected amongst those that makes it as councillors came. But then at some point it was felt again that no, we should perhaps go back to the system where they are appointed. Perhaps we talk about what were the drawbacks, perhaps maybe that necessitated the change in the system that takes us back to what would be commissioners, except for being called governors, but they are still now appointed. Maybe what were the drawbacks?
I think from what I've read, the big drawbacks were efficiency and accountability.
Right.
So the central government felt that the regional governmental bodies, and ipso facto then the governors, they were not being efficient in their duties, and they weren't really accountable to anyone because they were in actual fact accountable to the people. But the people are also not very, I wouldn't say educated, I would say we're confused, and I count myself in that, as to what is the regional council's job, what is the governor's job,
right.
And if I want to hold them accountable, what questions do I need to ask them?
Yes.
Right? And thus, because of that drawback of lack of accountability and lack of efficiency, I believe that the central government was like, okay, we need to pull in the reins.
But now that's very important point you raised there of accountability. But can you say in the current dispensation, you can clearly or directly hold them accountable, given the fact that you never elected them into power?
No, those were the drawbacks, and unfortunately, I don't see that the status quo has changed.
Right.
I don't know how Florian thinks
Please help
with regards to that.
There is actually a concern, just going back but to the Bantu era. So in the past, under the Bantu Native Commissions, it's where the regions were basically commissions, and the previous apartheid era appointed them commissioners to control that particular region, so to say. And then the constitutional dispensation came where there was free elections. And what was of concern, and it was actually also raised and highlighted by Professor Joseph Adisho, he said, now that the president is in a position to appoint the governors, we are going back to the Bantu commissioners, the one that you said that we have now changed, so we are back at that position. But just to zoom in, what my learned colleague have indicated, that there was a lot of ambiguity. No one knew what they were doing, who was doing what. In fact, governors were considered as the ones that would just do ribbon cutting when there would be an opening of an event or a new building, and basically to give speeches, so to say. they did not know what they were doing and who they report to. Was it the president? Was it the minister? Was it cabinet? Was it to the regional council? Because they're already part of the regional council. It was quite confusing.
It was a ceremonious position.
A ceremonious position.
Right.
And people did not know what to do. Everyone was at odds. And that is why they brought it about. And also most certainly for accountability.
Yes. Let's talk about the Regional Governors Appointment Act as amended. What are the salient features of that specific act?
It's a very short act.
Right. It only provides for the appointment?
It's one page. It's one page.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
It provides for the appointment of special advisors.
Yes.
And for the appointment of governors.
Right.
Both of which are at the pleasure of the president. They don't give any points of merit that the president must consider to make these appointments.
Right.
They don't give any circumstances that the president must consider if the president wants to remove individuals from these positions. This is a power that is solely discretionary for the president.
Right.
The president
Can hire and fire.
can hire, for special advisors and governors,
Yes.
can hire and fire at will. He doesn't have to consult cabinet. He doesn't have to consult National Assembly or the National Council.
Yes.
This is sole discretion. That's the one takeaway I had from that act.
I would have wanted to ask how democratic is this whole process of appointment of governors as opposed to when they were elected. But maybe before we get to that, in terms of that statute, what are the key functions of these regional governors and their advisors?
To me, it very much appears to be, again, very ceremonial. And it doesn't actually give salient jobs to the governor that they have to do. One thing that has changed very recently is the late President Geinkop provided a terms of reference that the governors have to use. And the one thing that was added by the terms of reference is an annual State of the Region address to basically inform everybody as to what's happening in the region. But I don't see any more than that, Florian.
And later I would really want us to look at the State of the Region address as it has been happening. I mean, of late we've seen issues relating to the State of the Region address where some other councillors felt like, no, since you are the governor and you were not elected, I have nothing to account to you, and therefore I'm not going to cooperate or give you any information that you need to go and report in your State of the Region address. So that in itself becomes a problem, but perhaps let's still talk about, we spoke about how they get into office, but then how they exit the office. I think, can we touch base on that? On what grounds can maybe the president fire a regional governor?
Daniel, just to go back to the previous question, I know that Robin indicated it's quite ceremonious. I was having difficulty also understanding the duties. But from the Act, I looked at the Act and the Constitution. In terms of the Appointment Act, they will act as the representatives for central government in the region.
The executive.
So the executive is now represented in the regions. That is the first duty that they're supposed to do. I don't know how they do it and how they perform it. But what they can also do is to investigate and report on any matters relating within the region if they are so directed by the minister, the line ministry, or the president. So then they can investigate those matters. They should also keep themselves informed of what is happening in the region. And how that happens is every time when the regional council has a meeting, they must send out a notice to the governor. The governor has the right to attend those meetings. The governor can deliberate in those meetings. But in essence, in terms of a decision making, he has no voting power in those meetings. and is then also entitled to attend the management committee meetings of the regional council. And then they can also settle and mediate any dispute. I had an opportunity in the Karas region once with the previous governor, I think it was Lucia Besson, where she, in essence, mediated a dispute that we had with, I believe it was at the Neckartal Dam. So she came in and she tried to resolve an employment dispute that was in the region. And then basically, the main duty of them is to act as a link between central government and the regions, and also the traditional authorities and the local authorities. And that brings us to, so what happens now? How are they appointed? Like Robin indicated, they are appointed at the pleasure of the president. We don't know what are the requirements. We don't know what are the criteria. You can be removed at any time since you are there at the pleasure of the president. Practical example would be in November last year, the governor of Ongwena region, region.
Yes.
Can't remember Valde or something. I can't remember the surname now. He was then removed. Yes. He was removed, and then they appointed the Inspector General, the former Inspector General, Sebastian Nadunya. Yes. He's now the governor for that particular region. So that would therefore beg the question. Your specialties was, in essence, so to say, running the police. You have that police training. You've got all those qualifications. Law enforcement. Yes. How will that align with your administrative head as part of having to overlook the national projects for government and linking that with the region? So we don't know. We can just say the president has a wise discretion to appoint and to remove.
And I want to quickly add to what Florian is saying.
Yes.
Considering that the two main duties are to act as a link to central government and to investigate what happens in the region and thus report back to the president. We have seen that people complain that the governor is in essence just a spy for central government, and that they are not going to do anything that is to the benefit of the populace of the region. So that's one of those things that there's no merit to those rumors or to those feelings, but these are the feelings that the populace are having.
Yes.
And when the populace are having feelings, it reflects in election time.
Those feelings should not necessarily be ignored.
No.
Thank you so much. You are watching The Wheels of Justice here on NBC. On our agenda tonight is the regional governors and the law. Upon our return, we will continue our conversation as well as grant you the opportunity to respectfully hit the experts up with your very own burning questions on the matter at hand. So stay right there. Welcome back, Namibia. Thank you for staying with us. Our number remains unchanged. That is 061-291-333-9-291-339. That is, if you are outside the capital, 061 is the area code. Please be respectful and brief to the point. Let's continue. Now, criticisms against the new regime or against what has now become the way in which governors gets to be first citizens or first regional citizens. Among those criticisms is that it is against, or it goes against the doctrine of separation of powers. What is your Leonard take on that? Do you believe or do you agree that the appointment of governors could go against the doctrine of separation of power? Mr. Biekes.
You know, the contention of separation of powers, I'm not, you know, in terms of the question, I've considered it.
Yes.
Separation of powers, in essence, entail, to be very brief, it's the three branches of government. So you have the legislature, those are the ones that are making the laws. Then you have, I believe, the judiciary. It's the ones that are now interpreting the laws and also making the common law.
Yes.
And to have a check whether the legislative are acting accordingly.
You will have to hold your thought there. Let's hear from Mr. John from Mashakati. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Well, I just wanted to add my 2 cents there.
Right.
I don't think the current status quo is problematic. I think it's fine as it is.
Right.
I think it's even better when you have a governor appointed by the president, because he can go directly to the president without going through bureaucracy. And the president can even call in the minister and say, why is this person coming to complain about this while we already have these things in place? As for the reason why this complaint is coming up about governors being appointed by the president, I think it's based off what is happening in Karas. Because let's not lie to ourselves. Even the minister had to give, to intervene to say we are going to give this town council to be run by so and so and so. So that has to already tell you that the person who's in the region is not basing his argument or based on, the work function. It's based on personality. I'm controlling the local authority, so I should be the one to say and do how things ought to be run. And I think that's what's happening here. And the governor is not wrong. She's acting within her right at the minimum. There's nothing wrong. If you feel like what you have done is well, then you should also come out and say, look, before we give to the governor, we have done so and so and such and such. The governor will take it from there. So here is just personalities, not rather the governor is not doing her job. No.
Right.
I think it's just based on personalities. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes. It's not a question, it's a comment rather, but perhaps your reaction to that. And
I feel like he has a point, especially his point regarding personalities.
Right.
Because of the fact that the Act doesn't provide for you have to have this skill or this qualification or, X, Y, Z and the other. And because it is at the sole discretion of the president, the issue of personality is very important. Will this person and their personality and their way of doing things, will they be able to get things done that is in the best interest of the region and the country at large? So, no, I think
but
the
will we be able to tell or determine that, given the fact that I think we are relying on the wisdom of the appointing authority to determine whether the person is able to do the job?
Just my 2 cents on that.
Yes.
John actually has a really valid point.
Right.
Look, there are pros and there are cons.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you earlier asked the question on separation of powers, the
Yes.
issue is not necessarily with the separation of powers. The executive is then the third branch of government, so then they can decide for executive decisions to be taken. The issue here is with democracy.
Right.
Remember, we are a democratic state. We are also a unitary state, but firstly a democratic state.
Yes.
And one of the concerns in the past is that we did not have the right to vote and to elect our own
representatives,
leaders, our own representatives.
Yes.
So the main concern here is that with now the appointment being made by the presidents and the criticism is that flies in the face of democracy. We are no longer entitled to appoint our own leaders. In 1997, the late Dr. Nikki Ihambo, he presented the paper on the decentralization policy. And part of the decentralization policy was to decentralize, particularly in the regions, and to allow the people to vote and to be part of the development and changes within their region. And they wanted to make it widespread. So not only does this act also fly in that policy that was adopted in cabinet and by parliament, they have now said, we are no longer going to consider this. So it flies in that phase. There are pros and there are cons. Like John have said, you will now have a political appointee. In fact, it's still a political appointee. In the past, it was someone that was elected. That person might also not have been properly qualified.
Yes.
They might have their own issues. But that person has been elected. That person knows what is for the region. One of the criticisms that we're also currently facing, and it's not about feelings. These are political experts that have raised their concerns. These are political experts that have done research extensively on this thing. And what they are also saying is that it totally flies in the face of democracy. We don't know what is going to happen. People are concerned. The person that is appointed by the president, is that person there for the region or is that person there for the executive? Whose interest are they looking at? To whom do they report? To the executive. Yes, it might be a link between government, regional government and national government, but where does this person's loyalty lie? And another concern is, when they said, when this act was brought about, it was in 2010. In 2010, 2 days before the regional council elections, the law was changed. A lot of people were concerned that it was a power move, given the fact that some of the regions will now be, some of the opposition parties will now be in control of the regions. So when we are saying Karas, yes, we do know Karas is controlled by another political party, LPM. You get Hartap, it's controlled by LPM. These people that are control of their regions, they now have to report to a governor that is not in essence report, but now they have to work for a person appointed that is not from their political party.
And that is basically the point I wanted to come to say, look, one of the bone of contention is basically the fact that this appointed authority, this appointed governor, provides an oversight to an elected office bearer. And it seems like a councillor who is duly elected by the populace gets to report to a governor who is appointed by the executive. Don't you see some kind of entanglement there?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is, the entanglement is not just between the governor who is appointed,
yes,
the elected councillors,
yes,
but then also the members of the constituency.
Just hold your thought there. Let's hear from Werner from Windhoek. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, your contribution, briefly.
Yes, just a small contribution.
Right.
I'm actually of the view that governors should not be appointed by the president. I'm of the view that, yes, it can remain, the reporting line can still be with the president or the appointing minister or the line minister. But in terms of Article 1, Sub-Article 2 of the Namibian Constitution, we must exercise our power through democratic institutions of Namibia guaranteed by the Constitution. And this thing of the president appointing a governor actually violates our constitutional rights to elect whomsoever we wish to represent us. That is my small contribution for tonight.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Werner basically says, look, the president is elected. Ministers are elected, except for those that are directly appointed by the president. Councillors are elected, but governors get to be appointed.
No, governors, ministers are also appointed.
They're
Members
also
of cabinet are appointed.
Yes.
Members of parliament are
they
elected.
Yeah, but they would come from a list, from a parliamentary list, of which is a list that is from that democratic process. It's from the ballot.
And I agree that that process can go down to the governors.
Right.
In the sense of, yes, the president can appoint,
Yes.
but appoint from the ranks that were elected,
Yes.
right? Don't appoint from, don't appoint a person that does not fall within the ranks of the councillors that were elected. I think
This is what
maybe
you are
that's where
proposing.
Werner and I see eye to eye.
This is what you are proposing. You are basically saying, in the same manner in which ministers are appointed, but drawn from a list, from a party list, perhaps,
But,
for which they...
but not so much
governors
party
should...
list.
Yes,
Not so much party list.
yes,
I think that during the elections,
yes.
right, the regional and local elections,
Right.
right, your councillors are elected
Yes.
by the populace.
Yes.
And then I think what might be a good compromise between how it was that the council would elect their governor from their ranks,
Yeah.
and the current dispensation where the president appoints at his or her pleasure, the compromise would be that the president appoints from the rank of the elected councillors.
Right.
But that just came from the back of my head. Florian, what do you think?
Yes, and Mr. Biekes, you were actually busy pondering on how it undermines democracy.
Not only that, it also, and this is, remember, I'm talking from a perspective of what the political analysts have already said.
Right.
Now, The concern here is also, what about the independence of the council? The council no longer have any independence. Robin just indicated to say that the president can then appoint from those that have already been elected. But then they themselves can just elect amongst themselves. There's no need for the president to come in.
Yes.
So those are one of the drawbacks and the criticisms. Another issue is who runs the regions? Even right now, who runs the regions?
Yeah.
Is it the governor or is it the council? And one of the concerns even in Karas was that, but we don't report to the regional governor. Why should we even attend the state of the region address, you know? We don't report to the governor. In fact, the governor is just here to come sit in our meetings and call special meetings. But just to come back to Werner's point, it's Werner, no?
Yes.
So Werner said it's our constitutional right. So in 2014, remember the Namibian constitution have not been amended a lot of times. I believe it's 3. I might be wrong, 3 or 4. The legislative draft is here.
Yes.
And in 2014, they amended the constitution. And what they did with that amendment, it's Article 110A of the Constitution. They basically repeat what is stated in the Appointment Act, the Special Advisors and the Regional Governors Appointment Act. Those functions and duties are also outlined in that particular article in the Constitution.
Right.
It allows for the president to appoint. It allows for the regional governor to call for special meetings to discuss any matter. It even allows for the regional governor to, what would you call it, to do the region of address and to outline, obviously, the planning activities of central government and then link it back to the region. So it gives those powers already in the Constitution. So therefore, both provisions are now in the Constitution, and there's now a constitutional provision that is taking away our right to elect.
Are these provisions contradictory? To what extent does the provision that gives the power to the president to appoint contradict the provision that says, look, the citizens should exercise their powers through a democratic process, which process is election?
Daniel, you're putting me on the spot in terms of contradiction.
Yes.
So the Constitution works like this. The Constitution can give you a right, but to each and every right, there are limitations.
Right.
Except now for the right to life. It's one of the ones that there can't be no limitation to. So in terms of the limitation, although you have the right to elect, but you are limited in terms of election when it comes to regional governors. And that applies across to all Namibians, and that is the yardstick that they will have to determine. For example, in Zimbabwe, they had a similar position that we currently have, where the president could appoint in their provinces. What they did in 2013, they went back and they changed their constitution. They amended it to remove that, to allow for a fair process. So that party that will then win the elections in that particular province, they will then be allowed to appoint a province chairperson that will act as the regional governor, because they have seen the principle of democracy by far outweigh the executive's discretion, in essence, to appoint because of the many drawbacks there are.
Yes. Kindly, let's unpack Article 18 of the Namibian Constitution that deals with administrative justice. Maybe let's first start by talking about what it provides.
When I was doing my prepping,
Yes.
I actually didn't see how Article 18 was relevant to our discussion tonight.
Right. Maybe let's talk about what it provides, and then we bring it back.
Because in regards to administrative justice,
Yes.
If an action is taken by an administrative body,
Yes.
it needs to be legally and procedurally fair.
Yes.
So the essence of Article 18
Yes.
is legal and procedural fairness,
Yes.
right? And that you can prove that an action taken that affects you was unlawful if you can prove that it was either legally unfair or procedurally unfair. You don't
Yes.
have to prove both at the same time. It's an either-or situation,
Yes.
right? Okay, so now I ask, how is that relevant to the appointment of governors? Unless you're arguing that the appointment of governors is an administrative act.
Is it an administrative act?
No, it's an executive act because it's done by the executive, it's done by the president.
Right.
No, yes. Look, from my point of view, and Article 18 is clear, it's basically administrative bodies
Yes.
and administrative officials to act fairly and reasonable in any decision making.
Yes.
And if you are an aggrieved person, you then have a right to challenge that administrative body or that
Action.
official's decision, so
Yes.
to say. Now the question would be, if they are serving as an executive,
Yes.
would they be an administrative official? One can argue that they are an administrative official because they are appointed from the executive. You can challenge the decision of the president. You can challenge the decision of a minister.
Yes.
You can challenge the decision of any administrative body.
Yes.
Now, if this is a function because of the unitary state, the argument is the executive is cascading it down to the regional, the unitary state. As much as they appoint ministers, the president is also entitled to appoint then
The governor.
the governors. So because it's a unitary state, it's the same thing to create for that link. So it's good in the sense that in the past of the uncertainty, there could have been different ways how they could have resolved that and allowed for the accountability. But the question now is, if I'm aggrieved by the decision of the governor in terms of Article 18, and that decision is fair, unfair, and unreasonable, I would then be entitled to challenge that decision through the process of Article 18.
As an administrative injustice.
As administrative, yes.
Thank you so much. Let's hear from James from Ochiwarongo. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Nadunya?
Yes.
And of course, the dear listeners.
Right. Your contribution, please.
My departure point is that, first of all, we need to understand that, because as I'm listening to it attentively, and I would like to appreciate the submission and contribution by Biekes, who's sitting there with you, that we are a unitary state and we are a republic. In that, president is voted by one constituency, that is being the Republic of Namibia, and the president cannot be everywhere. And as a result, in the 14 regions, the president must have ears and eyes that would actually act as political head of that very region. In terms of who to appoint, that prerogative lies with the president.
Yes.
But in terms of the functions and responsibilities, the governor of the region is actually the representative of the central government, and of course, having other responsibilities. Supreme to all is actually the direct reporting to the president on issues and developments within the region, because the president cannot be everywhere at every single day. Secondly to that, the argument that regional governors should be voted, it goes back to the amendment of the Constitution, and not only that, we need to migrate them from a republic into a federal state. In the federal state system, it is whereby the regional structures or regional organs are detached from central government. That's why in my submission I said I am supporting what Biekes is saying. As a unitary state, you have a central government that is represented by the head of state, regional government that is being a governor and a chairperson of the council, and the local authority. All that is one system. So you cannot have a separation of power issue that is broken, spoken of. With a separation of power, you talk of the three organs of the state. That's a different story altogether. At this point in time, the governor do not take any executive decision at the regional level, because you have the chairperson of the council in accordance with Regional Council Act, that is Act number 22 of 1992. And the governors are then appointed in accordance with the Special Advisor and Governors Act, that is Act number 6 of 1990, as amended in November 2010. So there is no whatsoever confusion that exists in the system. The brother that called earlier spoke about emotions and personalities. In cases where a person who holds office as a chairperson of that very regional council, and they would want to bring in about their emotions and personal opinions and what we would want to interpret based on the political situation of formation on the ground, it actually might create that very rift. But in cases where we would want to follow processes and systems, It is a clearly outlined responsibility. The
Yes.
governor doesn't call a regional council meeting.
Yes.
The governor doesn't summon councillors to regional council meetings, but rather preside over the affairs of government as the head of the region, but there is autonomy as far as regional council functionality is concerned.
Right.
Then, in my final submission, I would want to indicate that such a discussion, that's why I'm saying JKS is spot on to indicate the issue of unitary state. The difference between federal and republic is what we must discuss at that level, where lawyers need to come down, dissect this from a scholarly point, and school us the separation of federal vis-a-vis republic.
Right.
In federal states that you use there, in Nigeria, it's a federal state.
Right.
The US, all these are federal governments in which regional governors are voted by the constituents in the region. They have full budgets. They appoint their cabinets. They have structures that are decision-making and have full power.
Right.
So that
Mr.
separation
James,
issue has to be there.
Mr. James, thank you so much. But just before we let you go, what do you make of the sentiment that this specific appointment of governors undermines the principle of democracy, in that regional citizens have no longer the opportunity to elect for their governors?
Yeah, it's an argument depending on the viewpoint from which the person has departed in terms of that argument. But the point is,
right,
our national elections, you have what you call presidential and national assembly. These are two separate issues. The president is voted by the whole country as one constituency. Irrespective of the votes and the regional formation, so long that that president has been made victorious, that president is having the full executive power to preside over the country as one country. And as a result, the president went further in terms of the Special Advisor and Governors Act as amended in 2010, have the authority, the power to then appoint the regional governor. In case where democracy issue have to be now come to the fore, then we need to go back and amend our constitution to say that let's go and amend it to move from the republic to a federal state in which the governors can be voted at the regional level, they have autonomy, they have powers at the regional level, they have cabinets, they appoint their own systems, directors, they can fire anyone. So that power then comes to that, because democracy mustn't be interpreted on what I perceive as correct at that point. It must be taken wholesomely.
Yes, Mr. James, would you also then agree that in that case, the president is delegating his power to the governor? These are delegated power which are being further delegated to governors. Is that so?
That is precisely, you see, when you talk of the governor in a region,
right,
the governor is a direct representative of a president. Let me take an example of one that you have put there. The president will give a State of the Nation address. No governor gives a State of the Region address until a president gives a State of the Nation address. No governor gives a State of the Region address until the budget and appropriation is discussed and finalized. So you wait for the president of the country to give marching orders, and as a direct representative of the president, then you follow the format and, of course, the spirit and the ethos that have been expressed by the sitting president. So as a result, that is a delegated function whereby you sit with powers in a region, but serving at the behest. That's why you see there was a point when the late president, for example, Dr. Gengov said, I only have the date of when you are going to start as a minister or as a governor, but the end I determined because you are serving at the behest of a president. So you are actually there representing a sitting head of state until declared otherwise through constitutional amendment.
Mr. James, thank you so much for your contribution.
I hope it was worth it.
Right. Actually, Mr. James' voice sounds familiar right there, but let's continue. Perhaps your reaction to that very elaborate submission.
That very elaborate submission was also very well thought out, especially the comparison between a democratic republic and a federal republic. Also in line with, I can't remember who mentioned the issue with regards to the late Honorable Iyambu's decentralization policy, in that essentially at the end of the day, if the policy were to be followed true to its nature, that it will start mirroring a federal republic. So, and the thing is that personally, I'm not mad at that. Personally, I'm not mad at that. With centralization, and currently we are very centralized, the bulk of power and decision-making lies with the central government. It's why we have issues such as governors not knowing what they need to do, what they have to do, what their actual duties are, why we have regional councillors that feel that I don't need to report to the governor because the governor was appointed. That governor is not from our constituency.
And
that governor was not elected, and I don't report to him. I don't have to report to him. So it's a very nuanced issue, as decentralization would also get rid of a lot of bureaucracy in that way, so that if you need something done in the region, you have the power to get it done in the region. You don't have to run to the Minister of Urban and Regional Development to ask for a budget or to ask for permission, right? And you don't have to run to the President to ask for their sign-off.
Somebody with delegated power is right at your doorstep.
Exactly.
Let's hear from Mr. Dawson from Gibeon. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right, you're welcome.
My contribution will be as such. Number one, the appointment of the government, to my opinion, appointment of a governor is a clap in the face of democracy. Number two, appointment of the governor is a duplication of the appointments of regional councillors in the regions. What happened to the decentralization? Who is running the decentralization, the decentralized government in my region? Is supposed to be my councillors, my chairperson. And the governors are spoiling or crippling our constituency developments because they're taking away the powers of constituency councillors, of regional councillors in their constituencies. And the other one is, when it comes to the appointment of governors, is a clap in the face of separation of powers. Democracy is spoiled because these governors are political appointees. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right, let's still get your reaction to that contribution by Mr. Dawson from Gibeon.
I've been taking up all the airspace, Florian.
You see, this is the beauty of democracy.
Yes.
We had two callers. One advocates for a unitary state. That is in line. It reminds me of what the late President Age Geingob said when he was still the Minister of, what was the ministry again?
Trade.
Ministry of Trade. So when they tabled the bill, the act that was now in 2010, the amendment to the Special Advisors and the Regional Council Appointment Act in 2010, he argued that the purpose of that act and the amendment, especially the amendment, is to strengthen the unitary state. He then also argued that what this will then allow, you bring central government to the people in the region. So that goes hand in hand with, I'm not sure, is it John? What is the first gentleman's name? That called?
James. Mr. James.
Yes, James. So when you argued from a unitary state, but it does not mean because federal and unitary state, like I've indicated, and when the argument was made also by President Geingob, and he was still the former minister, they also compared it to how it's being done in India, where I think they have about 28 states. They have states, so federal states, so to say, but they also have the appointment system, and that is how he argued it from the unitary state. But there's been a lot of criticism. And I can do no better than what the caller just said from Gibeon.
Mr. Dawson.
Right. Mr. Dawson. Right. So do you see the two? The one advocates for this, another one postulates against it. There are pros and cons. But unfortunately, we can sit and we can discuss this at ends. Nothing will change.
Yes.
Because the Constitution has been amended. And that is 2014, about 10 years ago,
Yes.
to cater for this specifically. And it should be about time, until such time that the Constitution is amended again.
To revert back.
To revert, there's a constitutional
Yes.
challenge to the Constitution,
Yes.
which they can do.
Yes.
Until
Unfortunately, the status quo remains.
the status quo remains, and they will have
Let's
to
hear
find a
from
way.
Jonah from Hobabes. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, sir.
Mr. Jonah, you'll be our last caller for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Right.
So I'm of the opinion that the appointment of governors by the president it will not fit in democracy because it's a violation of voters' rights, and it is also giving a room of favoritism.
Right.
Because if you look at the list of recently appointed governors, these are people who are very close to the president, who have worked close to the president, but they are maybe capable people in the eyes of the president, but in the eyes of the citizen in the region, they are not performing. We are having a situation of governors who are serving for so long. For instance, the governor of Sokoto region, he was once shifted to executive. He said at the Ministry of Defense, all what he did, he went and spent some time in hotel, whereby he misused the government funds for that donation. From there, he was shifted again to the position where he left. That he stayed for so many years, but really, like for him now, we want him to be out. But who should take him out if you were not voting the governor?
Right. Mr. Jonah, thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
Yo, we are racing against time, and unfortunately, there is no recourse because you can't actually sue Mr. Time himself. But briefly, what redress do citizens have if they are aggrieved by the conduct of the governor who is appointed? And perhaps that is why the question of administrative justice came in.
Oh. Considering
And remember, the last caller said, but there is nothing you can do because you did not vote for this person.
Yes, just to assist. The problem is with you. To whom are you now accountable? Once you've been appointed by the president, you are no longer accountable to the local populace, the people in the region.
You are now accountable
You are accountable to the president. In fact, the Act makes it, if you look at the Act, Section 2, I can't remember what subsection it is, it actually says the president will determine at his discretion or will determine the terms and conditions of employment.
Yes.
So now I'm thinking, is the governor, if the employment, it means, is he appointed as a political head or as an employee? Because we've not seen an agreement. All that we've heard and what I came across is terms of reference.
Yes. Is that problematic?
There should be terms of reference.
Yes.
To improve the thing, they should also then bring in a performance agreement for there to be yardsticks. If he does not perform, for example, the Sokoto governor, if the governor does not perform, you as a citizen, there's basically nothing that you can do. That is in the hands of the president, because the accountability there is between the president and the regional governor.
Thank you so much, but time is really fast. When we return, we'll take a look at our customary jargon of the day. Welcome back. Now we take a look at the jargon of the day. And today we have these terms, two terms: at the pleasure of the president and the second one is special advisor. Briefly, we go with ladies first.
Thank you. At the pleasure of the president,
Yes.
I say that means that literally the president determines whether or not you have a job, you keep your job, what your job is.
Right. Thank you so much. A special advisor.
Special advisor, it's a person or individual that is appointed by the president. That special advisor can either advise the president, the cabinet, the minister, or any of the agencies. The president can also appoint a special advisor for the governor to assist the governor in the performance of his duties, and that will depend on the array of aspects that that agency or that individual might be seized with. So it can be social, it can be economic, it can be legal, it can be financial, it depends.
Leonard, friends, I believe there is more we could talk about tonight, but unfortunately time is no respecter of human beings. And I should just thank you for making time for the Wheels of Justice, and thank you for the manner in which you actually shared your expertise with our viewers.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
With that, we've come to the end of tonight's proceedings. We'll be back next Sunday, same time and same place with another episode of the Wheels of Justice. I'm Daniel Nadunya, but for now, this session stands adjourned.